Hey everyone, welcome to Handing the Shame Back. I've got an amazing guest for you tonight, and I think you're going to be blown away by her genuineness, her authenticity, and her bravery. It's a lot of words. So, as with all beautiful survivors that I bring to the show, there's a trigger warning. And the trigger warning is because you may get upset or angry or triggered yourself, and we don't want that for you. If that happens, please do stop watching, go to the show notes below, and you'll be directed to some help and resource. Right, I'm going to introduce you to Jodie. Jodie is a fellow Kiwi. She's a survivor. She has a story to share, and we're going to have a wonderful time discussing all of it. Welcome to the show, Jodie.
Hey.
Great to meet you. Hey, I came across you because our national newspaper Stuff had you in there, and I read a little bit about you, and I think I only got a few lines in, and I thought, I want to meet Jodie. So thank you, kia ora. Thank you for your bravery, and it's such a pleasure to have you here. So Jodie, just in the interest of context, I always ask survivors to share as much or as little as they're comfortable with about their sexual abuse history. Why? Because one thing you might say might have our beautiful survivors watching. Hello, beautiful ones. And it would be such a gift to hear from you. So I guess where were you growing up? So what part of New Zealand were you in?
So I grew up all over the place. We moved around a lot. Mostly the South Waikato and Bay of Plenty. Tokoroa, Rotorua, those sorts of areas. But we went as far as Auckland and down as far as Dannevirke, I think.
Yes. Beautiful. The Mount is a beautiful, beautiful place, and stunning. So yeah, beautiful part of New Zealand. For those not from New zealand, absolutely stunning. Google it. So Jodie, you grew up in a family. Obviously, you had your mum with you. Are you able to kind of share what happened for you, kind of what age you were when the abuse began?
Yeah. So I think I was around about 3. My first memory is from when I was around about 3, and that was confirmed because I remembered the circumstances around it, and my abuser at the time had a broken leg, and so the police, when they were doing the investigation, were able to corroborate the timeline and where it was. And so I was around about 3 when for my first memory of it. Yeah. It can't have been much before then, because I think my mum, he was my stepdad. It was my mum only got into a relationship just before I was 3. So it was probably happened pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have 4 siblings that were in the household. 1 sister and 3 brothers. Yeah.
And do you this is about you, but over to you if you want to share whether or not you were his only victim, I suppose.
So I definitely wasn't his only victim. I don't want to share too much on that, because I believe that we all tell our own stories when we're ready. Yeah, there were definitely other victims. He was definitely at one point or another convicted of the same crimes, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, I can't share who the victims are, because that's their story to tell.
And 100%. And I think what you've raised is great for our survivor audience and family to hear. So, team, great to know. You don't ever have to answer questions. You don't ever have to share anything you're not comfortable with. This is your story and your time. So please know that. Jodie, back to you.com.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, okay, you were 3 when all this began. Was this something he would try and separate you from the others to do, or was he just very confident in being able to?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning, he had a lot of sway. So my mum would obviously leave us alone with him quite often. If I was sick off school and he was not at work, because obviously at this time he had a broken leg, he was a bushman, so he wasn't working. So very, very opportunistic, I would say.
Yeah.
As time went on, obviously my abuse spanned 28 years. As time went on, he got a lot more cocky and confident. It would happen with other people in the house. It would happen at times with other people in the room, in a vehicle, with other people in the vehicle. Yeah, so it started as something that he would try to hide. And in the end, I think he just, because he had also manipulated those around me to look the other way, he just became confident and cocky, and yeah.
You raise a really good point, actually, because, grooming is not just something that happens to the child.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Yeah. And so what
They have to set a scene.
They have to set a scene.
Yeah. And him and myself were only a part of that scene. Obviously, there were siblings involved. There was my mother involved, even family, friends, schools. They were all pulled into the mix of it, because he had to paint himself as a certain type of person so that he was overlooked. I think when I went to the police, when I had my first interview, they asked me to write down all my schools so that they could go over the timeline to line up, because at that stage I had no supporting witnesses. They sort of had to corroborate my story. I filled an entire refill page full of just primary schools that I had attended. So again, all of those people were so fooled that nobody picked it up. Sometimes I was changing schools 3 times in a year. I don't understand why a teacher or a primary or a principal never asked questions.
Because these abusers, groomers, pedophiles, psychopaths, narcissists are so clever. And where there's confidence, Jodie, think about it, where there's a confident adult standing there just very easily stating what they want someone to believe, most people will believe that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The interesting thing, of course, is that he got away with it because potentially, I don't know what his moods were like, but I can imagine people were either scared or intimidated, or he was so charming, they just believed everything.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit of both.
Yeah.
When it comes to my mother, she was definitely abused as well. And I know a lot of people say to me, well, why don't you hate your mum? She put you through all of that. My mum is an amazing woman. She has issues from when she was a child as well. She was abused as well. And I think at a level, her and I share one huge thing, and that is that we understand our abuser, who was the same man to the same extent. We know how completely charming, and we know that he thinks on his feet, and the lies that can just run off his tongue to make it sound like truth. We understand it at the same level, and we have issues, obviously, because obviously there's unresolved trauma. But at the end of it, we were both just surviving, and she, and given the circumstances, I think she did her best in the circumstances.
And that's beautiful, and that's
Yeah.
really, it's sometimes easy, isn't it, for people to decide someone's wrong or they've let you down. But actually, until you're in that situation with that person, people don't really understand the complexities and the
Oh,
love.
absolutely. I've had people say to me, but you were an adult. Why didn't you stop it? Or how did you not know that he was manipulating you? Or, and it's quite funny, because even up until recently, I asked myself the same questions. I used to beat myself up and tell myself, you could have changed it, you could have, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. I was a woman living the life, in my head was still that same little girl who had been groomed and manipulated and violated and threatened and blackmailed, and the list goes on. And I also had my child to protect.
Yes.
As an adult, so my child is a product of the abuse I suffered. So I had him to protect and all of that as well. Yeah.
So, Jodie, I'm gonna call you up. You're gonna love me by the end of this. Looking back in hindsight, of course we know everything, and of course we could have done it differently, and of course we should have said no, or I can't, or keep away. The reality is, it doesn't matter how old or young you are. The age you were when the abuse started is the age you are whenever the abuse continues on the inside. So
I absolutely agree.
So for people to say, well, you were an adult, what they don't realize is there was a frightened, traumatized 3-year-old in there. And I know this because you and I both know Louise and Nicholas, who's our hero. And she, on this very show, said those words to me. She said, Gloria, at 19, I was the 11-year-old again. So I think Jodie, please take that gift, because there's
Oh,
no.
absolutely. I, in therapy, have been, I actually this year, so there was sentencing in December.
Yeah.
Um, and then the week after December, my husband, my son, and myself went down to the South Island for nearly a month. It was amazing. It was a trip of discovery, self-discovery, and discovering, oh my, the country. Why didn't I go there before? But it was a trip of discovery, and I come home a completely different woman. It was almost like I went from victim to survivor within that short period of time. And when I got back, I had a fire in my belly to just connect with myself and to learn who I was, because when you're 36 years old and your trauma has spanned 28 years of that 36 years, you have no idea who the hell you are.
No.
Because who am I without that trauma? Who could I have been? What do I want to do now? Who do I want to be now? So it's been a real year of self-discovery. And my husband is amazing. He is amazed at the difference in me. So it's really lovely. I've gone from last year, the worst year mentally ever. I was drugged up on so many meds, it wasn't funny. Had so many sleeping tablets, to I am on absolutely no meds now. I don't take any sleeping tablets anymore. Yeah, and I'm working for the first time in 13 years.
Yay.
So yeah, it's really amazing, and the shift has been really fast. It's quite overwhelming at times, but it's enjoyable and it's liberating and empowering, and it just makes me want to. It just drives me to go faster, to heal better, because as soon as I'm healed, I can use what I've learnt, what I've discovered, to help other people, because I believe that you don't go through abuse to that extent and survive it without um, without giving yourself the tools to use it to help others.
Well, and I think, it's been a very interesting, isn't it, Jodie? You had 28 years of hell,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're finally through that and being able to heal from it and move through it. And look at you, the speed of lightning.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. So
Yeah.
I met my husband actually only about 6 months after I went to the police.
Yeah.
So I wasn't in the greatest space. So hats off to him. He's he's had a few years of turmoil to go through before he's gotten to the sane me. But he's amazing. He's been my biggest cheerleader. Well, other than myself, been my biggest supporter. So I'm very, very lucky. And my son, he's just absolutely amazing. He's 13.
Wow.
He is autistic and has ADHD. So he's hard work, which is my mental health half the reason I haven't worked in 13 years, but he's the other half of the reason. But he's absolutely amazing. He he knows my story because he's very intelligent, and I don't want him to pick up a newspaper and read it.
No.
Um, and he's very supportive of me telling my story so that people can use it to help themselves and help others. So yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm very fortunate.
So he's got a mum who's a hero that doesn't wear a cape, basically.
Oh, yeah, pretty
take,
much.
take the one, and the other complexity too for you, and the other, not that it would have changed your beautiful love for your gorgeous son, but I guess having a beautiful boy as the result of that abuse must have had its own challenges for you.
Yeah, so a bit of both, really. He's definitely the light in the dark. You know, he's the light at the end of that tunnel, and he's been my reason for being. Given that, given the circumstances, he only has one side of the family, and then given those circumstances, my family is very trauma ridden and has lots of issues. So he doesn't have many people to that he can rely on, and so that's just driven me to live, to survive, to do it as sanely as possible, to do it without substances, to just get through each day. Some days all you can do is be proud of yourself for breathing, you know. But then there's times where in the last couple of years I have been re-traumatized and triggered and through the court process, and I've been frustrated at having to be a mum while I'm going through that, you know. And also he can be hard work sometimes, so just it's triggering, but it's also, you have to, I suppose I have to always be on high alert, make sure that I watch what comes out of my mouth when I'm frustrated, because I'm not sure about you, but when I'm anxious or when I'm in a state of trauma, you know, when I've been triggered, generally it's like a cat's a whip of the tongue. The first thing I think of comes out of my mouth, and it's generally nothing I would ever say or think normally.
Well, you know, Jodie, just to give you a hall pass here, you know, we are human. Last time I checked, we're going to get it wrong, and the great thing about our kids is they will always reflect that straight back. We're never going to be left in any doubt. So,
yeah, definitely. But yeah, so it is. It's a juggling act.
Yeah.
But he definitely is the light at the end of that tunnel. He gave me a reason to get through it, and that's, you know, who knows what could have happened if he hadn't turned up when he did.
I see.
Because I was actually told by doctors that I would never have children. And he is my only child. So he's, you know, while the circumstances weren't great, he's a miracle in itself. You know, maybe the universe just knew I needed him.
It's beautiful, and he needs you. He's chosen you as well.
I know.
and I guess too, I just want to stop you there, because for our beautiful audience watching, guys, there's going to be people among you who, like the wonderful Jodie sitting here tonight, do have amazing children who are the result of the abuse you suffered. And, you know, I have no doubt that the love you feel and bonds that are there can never be broken. But, you know, full credit and full respect to you guys and you, Jodie, because, I can just imagine the narrative you would have been listening to over the years. And wow, what an amazing woman you are. I'm so sorry you had to go through all that, and I'm really, I'd love to know, with the court case, are you able to share with us kind of what happened at the court case?
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
I went and had my name suppression dropped, so I'm allowed to tell you whatever I damn well want.
Good.
So it was actually really annoying. He
Sorry.
really he was due last year in July. He was due to go up for trial.
Yeah.
I had spent 2 years, been through countless breakdowns, mental breakdowns, to prepare myself for it. And then probably 4 weeks before trial, he pled guilty, and it completely threw me. So he had been arrested 2 years prior and spent that entire 2 years on electronic bracelet bail. He was still allowed to go to work. He was still allowed to go to supermarkets. I had to move towns because I was so scared of running into him. And everybody sort of said to me, aren't you glad? Because then you don't have to go through trial. And I was like, well, no, because he just took the control away from me again. I had prepared myself for 2 years to sit in that courtroom and to sit in that courtroom and to expose who he was and what he'd done. And he took that away. A part of me was scared that would have impacted on his sentence. Given New Zealand's court justice system, I was very worried. Yeah. And then, so after that, he went to prison the day that he pled guilty, which was in June last year. He then went through what I understand of some psychologist staff to get some reports done. Sentencing was supposed to be in October, but the psychologist reports went back, so they had to cancel that. So again, I was left completely spiraling. This is, mind you, this is 5 years after, 5.5 years after I had first gone to the police. So the process had just been so long. And given that it was in October, I was just so upset because I was sure that there's no way there's going to be a court date pop up before the end of the year. And then in December, they rang me and they said, look, we've got a date available and we're going to book it. So he went up, I think it might have been the 16th of December last year. And he got the best, for me, the best outcome that I could possibly have, hoped for.
Wow. And he can't hurt anyone again.
Well, that was it. I think, everybody said to me, don't you want him to rot in hell, rot in prison? Well, you know what? No, I don't. There's a human somewhere in there. And the whole time I've been completely conflicted because there were times where parts of him were really good. Parts of him as a stepdad were really good. He took us away every single year for Christmas holidays. We really enjoyed that as family. He went to work every day and put food on our tables. And, so there were parts of him that would have made a really great stepdad. But then there was a side to him that was a monster. And, a side to him that took everything from me. So it's been really conflicting. And I still hope that he takes the time to get the help that he needs, because then he can find peace within himself as well. Because I don't know, everybody deserves peace.
Yeah, and I think, you raise another good point. You. For, beautiful survivors out there, it can be quite complex, because if your abuser was someone close to you, chances are you saw some good things in them as well.
Yeah.
You experience their generosity, and as Jodie's saying, that can actually be quite confusing, because on the one hand, as a small child, we don't have the cognition to make sense of any of it, just FYI. But on the one hand, we're frightened, but on the other hand, we're grateful for the kindness or the good stuff that can emerge. So I understand the complexities, and I think, Jodie, interesting, isn't it, that day in court that you were hoping for? Of course, because in a way it's closure, isn't it? Being able to share.
I actually truly don't remember the sentencing day. I was
Dissociated,
had lots of lorazepam in my system.
Yeah.
My doctor made sure that I was comfortable, because I was just not in the best frame of mind. But yeah, very dissociated. I actually couldn't remember anything that was said in the courtroom. And when the sentence was handed down, and Bernard is his name, he left. They took him out and then took the judge out, and I went to stand up to leave, and I actually, my legs gave out underneath me. It was like I was just so overwhelmed. I just passed out. Everything went black. My husband actually, luckily, he caught me. And it was just really overwhelming. And sort of the lawyer and the police lady investigator took us back to a room to make sure we understood the sentence. Yeah, and it wasn't until the reporter that approached me, well, she approached the court for information, and given that it's public information, but the police investigator just gave me a heads up, and I asked her, probably a couple of weeks later, if I could have the contact for the reporter, because just in my mind, if anything was going to be written, I needed to make sure that it was written factually.
Yes.
So I offered to work with her, to make sure that, one, she could write an amazing piece with the story I had to give, but just two, that the only things that were printed were factual, because so many things can be twisted in the world of media.
And what was your experience? Did you find that?
It was actually really amazing. So
did a good
I
job.
stipulated to her, one, my son, he's, there can be a mention in there that I fell pregnant, but I didn't want any information that would
identify
him, more just because he's going to have his own story to tell one day. I'm obviously, he's a part of my story, so I tell my story with him in it, but his parts of it I want him to be able to tell, if he wants to. And also just that once it was ready for publishing, I wanted to be able to read over it, and anything that I didn't find relevant or factual, either change. And she agreed to both, and she was actually really amazing. Very busy woman, so it took time. It also took time because obviously this happened over the Christmas period, so it took probably a good couple of months for her to be able to get anything back from the courts to start with. And then we went through the process of having the name suppression lifted. So that again took time.
It's quite a thing, isn't it? You're not the first survivor I've had on the show who said the same thing. So my understanding, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, is that unless you apply to have your name suppression lifted, your name will be suppressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's automatic in New Zealand. So yeah, as far as I know, every victim of sexual assault has name suppression. I didn't actually know that you could apply to have it lifted. And I didn't actually do it just so that we could tell my story in the paper, but just because one day I want to write a book. I don't want to have to tippy toe over what I say in my book. You know, I want the world to know the people who were in his life that were fooled, the hundreds of friends that I've had over the years that probably judged me for shitty choices and shitty decisions that I've made, that to understand that those decisions and choices were made coming from a person who was trying to survive. Because sometimes, well, no, a lot of the times hurt people, right? And when you don't actually know you're hurt, when you don't actually know that you are damaged, you don't know that you are hurting people. It took me going to therapy to realize that my mental health issues were not just character flaws that I thought I had. I thought that this was just me as a person, and that I was just a terrible person who was a terrible friend because I spend weeks locked in my bedroom and don't contact anyone, or I dismiss 100 invitations for parties and whatnot, you know. But really, they're all just trauma responses that I didn't realize I had PTSD and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah,
it's quite huge, and there's a lot to unpack. And you know, it's interesting because you said earlier, you know, you didn't even know who you were. So on that basis, how the hell could you be anything resembling who you really are?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this year is I'm being selfish for the first time ever. It's so good.
Oh, I love it.
Unapologetically selfish. And that's something that I would recommend to anyone. If you have been a people pleaser and just somebody who does for others because if you can't help yourself,
yeah,
and if you can't help yourself, it's easy to help others. It gives you joy to see others succeed because you can't, or you are in a position where you can't. But now it's just time to help myself, and I'm loving it. Absolutely.
I'm loving it for you. I'm loving it. Hey, so Jodie, just wanted to ask what, you know, for our beautiful survivor fans watching, what has helped you in your kind of recovery and healing through the process? What would you say has helped you?
Yeah, so I think forgiving myself, stopping the judgment of myself, loving myself, connecting with myself, just acknowledging the amazing amounts of strength and resilience I have, and man, I've just recently had to do my CV, and I just thought, what skills do I have? Well, I've got problem solving, I've got conflict resolution, I've got, you know, all of these things, and it's all derived from skills that I've learned over the years to just survive. So just acknowledge the amazing things that you do every day that you don't realize that you do.
And
One
turning
thing I learned, sorry.
Turning what you had to do to survive into something that's practical and pragmatic.
Yeah,
As an adult,
absolutely.
into a working environment. Oh, that's beautiful.
And then last year I experienced acupuncture to help my mental health. I was a very, very big skeptic. It's actually something that I absolutely believe in now. It was huge. It was huge for my mental health. It became my favorite hour every week. um, it, if you go in with an open mind and an open heart, it turned my whole mind, like it worked. I don't know how it works or what it works. And then obviously therapy. I go to therapy once a week. Generally I think that I just go there and talk a lot of shit, and as it's coming out of my mouth, it helps me to dissect it and understand it, rather than I don't go really for what the therapist can do for me, because really at the end of the day, we can only heal ourselves. They can only give us the tools to heal ourselves.
Well,
And
so by
then,
releasing it, you're making sense of it.
yeah, exactly. And it's just giving me a safe space to do that. I know that I can go in there and say whatever the hell I want, and it's not going to go anywhere else, because obviously there's parts of my story that I probably won't ever tell. Well, maybe one day I'll feel comfortable, but right now, some of it, and just being able to make sense of it and being able to acknowledge it, and because you can't let it go without acknowledging it.
No.
So that's really healing. And then just recently in New Zealand, obviously we have Māori culture. I'm a Māori woman, and I have just recently been and started miri miri, which is a Māori practice, and it's beautiful, and it's so therapy helps me here. Miri miri helps me there inside. So yeah, those are just a few things, and just connecting with yourself, just listening to yourself, being honest with yourself.
So powerful. And look, you're offering so much. I think our audience, the survivors who watch will be thinking, gosh, I want to try acupuncture, I want to try miri miri.
That's amazing.
All of that. So just as we're moving into like a closeout, what would you recommend to survivors that are maybe newly starting the healing journey, or trying to come to terms with the reality of their abuse? What advice would you give to our beautiful survivors?
I think again, I would just go with that unapologetically. Just be you. Tell your truth. Don't worry about what parts of your truth will hurt somebody else, because you're not responsible for other people's feelings. You're not responsible for how other people will take your words, will take your story. You're only responsible for your healing journey. And the only way that you can heal is to acknowledge, tell the story, and release it. That's, yeah, just again, be really forgiving of yourself. Don't judge yourself. Acknowledge the amazing parts of you. The days where you're having an amazing day, make them productive. Do something nice for yourself, so that, do something that you'll thank yourself for later, because we all know that, it could be 3 weeks before you have another amazing day. Yeah, just
That's
be your own biggest cheerleader, basically, because while you can have other people around you supporting you, they can't carry the weight of your trauma. Your shoulders are the only shoulders that are big enough to carry that weight, and the only way you can take that weight off your shoulders is just to be you, and just to, yeah, connect with yourself and let it go. It gets lighter.
that's beautiful. That's so reassuring. Hey, Jodie, just as we're finishing, is there anything, you amazing survivor, that you would like to share that we haven't as yet?
There's probably a million things.
Oh,
There's so
break it
much.
down to one.
There's so much. Um, no, I think I just want to make it clear that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to be proud of what you've been through. Don't feel shameful. There's so much stigma attached to abuse, and people feel so much shame because it's so silent. The only way that we're going to take the stigma and shame out of it is to talk about it, and to, it doesn't even necessarily need to go as far as prosecution or going to the police. Just tell your story, talk to people. If people don't believe you, if people think you're lying, they're not people you need in your corner anyway. Yeah, just
Well,
yeah.
and that's why this show exists, called Handing the Shame Back, because every time we share our story, we're handing the shame back.
Oh, absolutely.
And thank you so much. So, Jodie, 100% agree. Please just stay right there.
I
Hey,
will.
audience, aren't we very lucky tonight to have the wonderful Jodie with us? And she said a few things that I think are really, really meaningful. And one was, she was talking about what helped her, and one was forgiving herself, stopping the judgment of herself. But the real gold in there for me was the connecting with self, because I think as survivors, sometimes we can lose that connection because we're so busy in our trauma responses and being what we needed to be, we lose who we are. And the other thing she said, which I love, was unapologetically just be you. Because beautiful survivors, you can only just be you. So thank you to Jodie, and for you wonderful ones out there. I see you. I stand beside you. I believe you.